The more you study the ancient past, whether it's in ancient Greece or a lot of my book focuses on Paleo-Christianity, the more you see this kind of ritual. So can I show you some images of Paleo-Christian ritual?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's do it. I love it. I love talking to you.
Okay, cool.
What do you got?
Jamie, there should be a folder called Circe.
Circe, like the lady from Game of Thrones?
Like the lady from Game of Thrones, yeah. And
she's my favorite.
So then you'll get to know her a lot better.
Such a great character.
You'll get to know her a lot better.
Shame. Shame.
What am I looking for here?
It's in my Google Drive.
Oh no, yeah, I have the folder. What do you want me to pull up?
Oh,
the
just
first few pictures are just
from
words.
the first one. Yeah, we can start with we can go into the pictures.
My point. It's just words though. It's
That's fine.
Okay.
We can move forward from there. So, what I'm going to show you are some images from a hypogeum. And I don't think we got around to this last time, but a hypogeum was this underground chamber, and it was the site where most of the early Christian ritual took place. So if you think back to Paleo-Christianity, between the death of Christ and Constantine, which is 300 years later, give or take, Christianity was this illegal cult. It was this underground religion, in some cases literally. So the only places where you would celebrate the Eucharist and the proto-mass were in small, in private homes, and this agape meal. And then sometimes you'd go underground into these like necropolis, like these places of the dead. And that, for some reason, was the place where the Mass was celebrated. And so as part of my research for the book, I went into some of these underground chambers to see what the earliest Christians would have seen and some of the evidence that was left behind in terms of like frescoes. So there's no botanical, chemical analysis of what was happening in these places, but we do have images, we have frescoes, and we have the idea of what the early ritual would have looked like. And a couple weeks ago, I reached out to the Vatican specifically to ask them if I could show these images to you today. And they said yes.
All right. Thank you, Vatican.
They're actually
take back all the shit I said about you.
They're great research partners. It's the Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology. So it's the archaeological team that is responsible for the preservation and conservation of all these ancient sites. And I think it's an aspect of early Christianity that like very few people know about. And so what was happening underground, if you want to go back to the first slide just quickly, there was this Yale professor who sadly died in recent years. It was Ramsay McMullen. And what he talks about are these underground chill-outs. They were called vigilia. The Latin word for them is refrigerium, where we get the word refrigerator. So they were like underground chill-outs where certainly the Romans, and it's believed the earliest Christians, would have gone to celebrate the dead with sacramental wine, with celebratory wine. They would have a wine ceremony in these dank chambers underground to like usher the dead into the afterlife or bring them refreshment. They were called refrigeria. And so it's kind of unclear when the refrigeria, a pagan Roman ceremony, became like a proto-Eucharistic Christian Mass. Like the line is very blurred at this period of time, which I call the pagan continuity hypothesis. This notion that the older wine drinking consumption by the Romans, the Greeks before them, somehow influenced, at least in some cases, the earliest celebrations of the Mass. And so I just showed this quickly to show that, in these wine parties, Ramsay has this great line saying that this was not just picnicking at the bottom there. He said this was religion. So even though it looks like a picnic, it looks like they were gathering over almost like a Mexican Day of the Dead ceremony. Like they would meet by the graveyard to remember the dead and the ancestors. Yeah, there was wine and food, but this was religion to the ancient Romans. And I think to the Romanized Christians who followed them in the first century, second century, third century. So the next slide is that's just a bunch more text from a Catholic encyclopedia, by the way, from 1907, if I'm not mistaken. And it talks about how the celebration of the dead and this funeral banquet you see right in the middle there, this notion that the funeral banquet is really kind of at the core of what the early Mass was. Even if you go back to the Gospels, it was, Jesus asking for the commemoration of this event. Do this in memory of me. As you do this in memory of me, remember my life, death, and eventual resurrection this is sort of the prototype for the Mass. And so it's important to remember that the funeral banquet was there to bind those together who remained faithful to the memory of Jesus after his death. It's very ssimilar to this Roman refrigerium. So I give all that as background just to show you the first couple images from the hypogeum. So if you skip to the next one, or maybe, so that's what it looks like when you go underground. It was discovered in 1919, I think, as a Fiat shop around the corner was trying to expand into a sunken garage. They came across these monuments.
Wow.
Which is not uncommon in Greece and Italy and
Yeah.
around the Mediterranean. So they found this hypogeum, which dates to the 3rd century AD. So we don't have firm dates. It could be anywhere from like 220 to 250 AD. So this is the time period we're talking about. So these were tombs. They're rock-cut tombs in the hypogeum here. If you go to the next one of the first things I saw when I went into the hypogeum was this, which, it's a little strange because, again, you're trying to figure out if this is a Roman pagan refrigerium or if this is a Christian celebration of some sort of Eucharist. Because, again, this site is controlled by the Vatican. The Vatican has preserved this for reasons. And it's been said by the Pontifical Commission that these are some of the most explicit and concrete evidence for the origins of Christianity. So this is, whether this is purely pagan or Christian is sort of a moment of debate. But, if you just look at it, what's odd is that you see 12 people gathered around a table. And when you think of 12 people gathered around a table, you think of something like the Last Supper. And so it's pretty clear that what's important to this dinner is the chalice that's being lifted by the servant there, or maybe it's a priest of some sort. So it's clear that whatever's happening, wine is important to this gathering of 12 people. The interesting part is the woman who's appearing in the back. If you look closely, there's sort of like this effigy of a woman descending exactly from the background to the foreground. It's thought that she is Aurelia Prima, and Aurelia was one of the dead women to whom the hypogeum was dedicated. And so what they think is that's her. This is one of the Vatican's interpretations, is that that's her emerging from the world of the dead to take place in this funeral banquet, in this ceremony. So we're not really sure.
How do they interpret that?
Because she's not seated at the table, and because what they think this is that whenever, especially because of the place that we're in, which is underground, that when wine is being served at a refrigerium, that the Romans would habitually do this in order to commune with the dead, not as a picnic, but as religion, as Ramsay MacMullen says. So this was their religion for keeping alive that relationship to the dead and refreshing the dead in the afterlife. And when you went there to celebrate them, they would appear. And Ramsay has this great line in his scholarship where he says, the dead themselves participated, which is one of my favorite lines in his research. The dead themselves participated. So that's Aurelia participating in a funeral banquet that's happening underground. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, so again, unclear if that's Christian or pagan, and then you see some of these images. That's interpreted as Jesus as the Good Shepherd from the Gospel of John. You see the goats down below. So that's either interpreted as Saint Paul or Plotinus. Plotinus was this Neoplatonic philosopher who lived around that time in the 3rd century. And so it's unclear if that's Saint Paul or Plotinus, or maybe it's Paul using the image of Plotinus to call up the imagery. And again, everything is very ambiguous because Christianity is illegal. So you don't go down there and paint very explicit images of Jesus or the Last Supper or Christian elements, because you could get in trouble for that, obviously. So there's a lot of ambiguity in these frescoes. So if you move past that, this is the most important one, which is kind of mind-boggling. So this is just to the right of that banquet scene, and it's called the Homeric fresco. And it's called the Homeric fresco because it seems to portray a very famous scene from Homer's Odyssey. And it's when Odysseus is stuck on the island with Circe, the witch Circe, the prototypical witch of antiquity, Circe. He's stuck on the island with her, and the 3 dudes you see there on the bottom to the left have just been transformed from pigs back into men. It's one of the most famous scenes in Book 10 of the Odyssey, where Circe delivers a potion. She concocts a potion, and in Greek it says that the verb they use for concoct the potion is kukio, just like the ancient potion Atalusis. This is one of the mythical precedents for what would become the actual kukion that was used in the Eleusinian mysteries. And so she uses this mythical kukion in which she casts these drugs. It says that she puts drugs into this potion to transform the men into pigs, then back to men. And so it's a very, of all the 27,000 and changed lines of the Odyssey and the Iliad, it's a particularly strange image to evoke from Homer, because Circe, amongst all the many things she's famous for, is for being a witch and for having this profound knowledge of the botanical world and potions and things that we might call psychedelics today. And so it's a really strange image to have there. And so the Vatican produced this monograph over a decade ago, where one of their scholars, Alexia Latini, goes over this in great detail to demonstrate why exactly this is Circe. And up above, that's another image of Circe with all her animals on this magical island. And what they found there exactly was cinnabar. And during the conservation process, they were able to identify the mercury sulfide that had been used to paint this red image of cinnabar around the house, which is a very telling detail, because there's a line just before this in the Odyssey where it talks about the fiery smoke coming out of Circe's palace. So between the fiery smoke and the cinnabar and the web down below, there's a lot of certainty that this is probably Circe. If you go to the next slide.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
What are those people laying down? If you zoom in on Circe?
Right here.
Yeah.
Up above?
What are those people laying down?
Yeah,
What's that supposed to represent?
That's the interpretation from the monograph is that that's some sort of funeral bier. So
so those are dead people.
that could be dead people. Yeah. Which is also strange.
What's that? Satan. Looks like Satan.
That we can't make out. So the loom was another telltale sign. So there's the fiery smoke at the palace, and the loom is another telltale sign. So this is, if it were just this, you would think, okay, maybe it's just Circe and a loom. But if you go to the next slide, and the next one, there's a manuscript at the in the Pope's library called the Vergilius Vaticanus. And you can find this online. And in the Vergilius Vaticanus manuscript, which is from about 400 to 430 AD, there's this picture of Circe and the loom, which corresponds to Circe and the loom on the right. So they know for sure, with relative certainty at least, that there's some image continuity between Circe and the loom. And she's talked about in the ancient literature as always being at the loom. So the confidence is rising.
And for folks who don't know what a loom is, it's how you create cloth with threads. Some people.
Yeah, that's true.
So with this, if you're just listening to this, what she has is like, if you've ever seen people make cloth in a traditional way with a loom, she's got why did they depict her with a loom? Why was she known as a person who makes cloth?
Because that's what Homer said. That's what Homer says in his epic poetry. And that's what Virgil also says in his epic poetry. So Homer writes the Odyssey. Centuries later, Virgil writes the Aeneid. That's sort of the mythical founding of Rome, the main character Aeneas. And in both versions, there's a Circe character. So this Circe character survives for centuries in the ancient world, from the Greek to the Latin. And in both cases, the loom is mentioned. And also, what's mentioned in these passages are the fact that Circe uses potent herbs. In the Latin, it says potentibus herbis. So she's using potent herbs and mixing up potions to transform these men into pigs, and vice versa. So, it's a very strange idea to have a pagan witch in a fresco that's been preserved in this Paleo-Christian monument. Combined with this refrigerium, sort of Eucharistic celebration of the dead. And then in the last few images, what it depicts is a woman being initiated into these high mysteries. So things you don't normally associate with early Christianity.